In this video, we will learn 10 new words through short stories. It might seem like a small step, but in 100 days, you will easily learn 1,000 words, which is a big achievement. To help you learn better, please watch each video twice. At the end of the video, try to make your own sentences using the new words you've learned. Stay with us and let's explore today's new words. The mysterious disappearance of the forest. I had always loved the forest behind my grandmother's house. As a child, I would run through the tall trees, listening to the birds sing and feeling the cool breeze on my face. It was a magical place, full of life. But one summer, everything changed. I returned to visit my grandmother after a year away. The moment I stepped off the bus, I felt something was wrong. The air was hotter, drier. The usual chirping of birds was missing. I ran to the forest, but when I arrived, my heart sank. The green paradise was disappearing. The trees were dry, some had been cut down, and the river that once flowed through the forest was only a thin stream. The place felt empty. It was as if the ecosystem was dying. I hurried back to my grandmother's house. "Grandma, what happened to the forest?" I asked, out of breath. She sighed and pointed to the distant mountains. "People have been cutting trees for wood. The animals are leaving because they have no food. Without trees, the soil is drying up. The whole ecosystem is falling apart." I didn't fully understand the word ecosystem, but I could see what she meant. The forest was not just trees, it was home to birds, deer, insects, and plants. They all depended on each other. Without one, the others suffered. Determined to help, I gathered some villagers. We planted new trees, cleaned the river, and stopped people from cutting more wood. It was hard work, but slowly life began to return. Birds came back, and the air felt fresh again. One evening, as I sat by the river, watching fish swim in the clear water, I finally understood. An ecosystem is like a giant puzzle, where every piece, animals, plants, water, and air, fits together. If one piece is missing, everything is affected. The forest still needed time to heal, but now I knew its secret. If we take care of the ecosystem, it will take care of us.
The day the colors faded. I had always loved the jungle near my village. It was full of colors, bright flowers, singing birds, and shining insects. Every morning I walked through the trees, listening to the sounds of life around me. The jungle was full of biodiversity, so many different animals, plants, and creatures living together. But one day, everything started to change. It began when the river turned brown. My grandmother told me that factories upstream were throwing chemicals into the water. The fish disappeared first. Then the birds stopped singing. Day by day, the jungle became quieter. The biodiversity was fading. I asked my father, "Why is everything changing?" He sighed. "When the fish die, the birds have no food. When the trees are cut, the insects have no home. The jungle needs its biodiversity to stay alive." I didn't understand the word biodiversity fully, but I knew one thing: the jungle was sick. One afternoon, I went to my favorite place, a small hill where I could see the whole jungle. But instead of green, I saw patches of dry land. Trees were gone in many places. I saw trucks carrying wood away. I saw smoke from the factories. Tears filled my eyes. If we lose the biodiversity, we lose the jungle, I whispered. That night, I gathered my friends. We must do something, I told them. We started small. We planted trees. We cleaned the river. We talked to the villagers about protecting the jungle. Slowly, we saw changes. One morning, I heard something I hadn't heard in months, a bird singing. I ran outside and saw butterflies again. Trees had new leaves. The biodiversity was coming back. I finally understood. Biodiversity is not just animals and plants. It is life. It is the connection between everything in nature. If one part is lost, everything suffers. But if we protect it, life returns. The jungle still needed time to heal, but now I knew how to help.
The river that disappeared. As a child, I loved the river near my village. It was clear and full of fish. The trees around it were tall and green, and birds sang all day. My grandfather always told me, the river gives us life. That's why conservation is important. At that time, I didn't understand the word conservation. I just knew that the river was beautiful, and I thought it would stay that way forever. But things change. Years later, when I returned to my village, the river was almost gone. The water was low and dirty. The fish had disappeared. The trees were being cut down, and the air was filled with dust. I asked my grandfather, "What happened?" He looked sad. People forgot about conservation. They took too much water. They cut too many trees. Now the river is dying. I walked along the dry riverbed. There were no birds, no sounds of life. I finally understood without conservation, nature cannot survive. I couldn't let the river disappear. I gathered the villagers and told them what my grandfather had taught me. We must practice conservation. We need to plant trees, clean the water, and use the river wisely. Some people laughed. The river is already dead, they said. But others listened. We started small. We planted trees along the riverbank. We stopped wasting water. We told everyone about conservation. Months passed. The trees grew. The soil became strong again. And one day, something amazing happened. Water returned to the river. It was not much, but it was a start. Then I heard a sound I hadn't heard in years, a bird singing. Fish slowly came back. The river was alive again. At that moment, I truly understood conservation. It is not just protecting nature, it is saving the future. Now, when children play by the river, I tell them what my grandfather told me. The river gives us life. That's why conservation is important. And this time, I know they will listen.
The fox that lost its home. When I was a child, I loved the small forest behind my house. It was full of life birds, rabbits, and even a family of foxes. I often sat near the trees, watching them play. My father told me, this forest is their habitat, their home, their shelter, their world. I didn't think much about the word habitat back then. I only knew that the animals belonged there. But one day everything changed. One morning I heard loud machines. I ran outside and saw men cutting down trees. The forest, the animals' habitat, was disappearing. I searched for the foxes, but they were gone. Their habitat was now piles of wood and empty land. The rabbits had no place to hide. The birds had no trees to rest on. That night I asked my father, "Where will they go?" He sighed. When animals lose their habitat, they struggle to survive. Some may leave, but others may not make it. His words stayed with me. I felt guilty. I had always thought the forest would be there forever. I never imagined a world without it. The next day, I walked through what was left of the forest. I found a small fox, alone and scared. Its habitat was gone, and it had nowhere to go. I knew I had to do something. I started learning about protecting habitats. I told my neighbors about the animals that had lost their homes. Some people didn't care, but others listened. We planted trees. We created a safe space for animals. We worked to rebuild the fox's habitat. Months passed. Slowly, the trees grew and the animals returned. One evening, I saw the little fox again, this time not alone. It had found a new habitat, a new home. That was when I truly understood. A habitat is not just a place, it is life itself. Without it, nothing can survive. Now, when I see a forest, I don't just see trees. I see habitats, homes for creatures that depend on them. And I know it is our job to protect them.
The river that couldn't breathe. When I was a child, I used to play by the river near my house. The water was clear, and fish swam beneath the surface. Birds sang in the trees, and everything felt alive. But as I grew older, something changed. The river wasn't the same anymore. The water became dark, and a terrible smell filled the air. The fish disappeared. The birds stopped coming. I didn't understand why until my grandfather told me. "This is pollution, Leo. The river is sick." At first, I didn't believe him. How could a river be sick? But then, I saw it with my own eyes: plastic bottles, cans, and bags floating on the surface. The factories nearby poured dirty water into the river. People threw trash without thinking. Day by day, the pollution got worse. The river that once gave life was now filled with poison. One day, I saw a bird trapped in plastic near the shore. Its wings were weak, its body covered in oil. I wanted to help, but I felt powerless. I ran home and asked my grandfather, "Can we save the river?" He nodded. "Yes, but we must act. Pollution doesn't stop unless people stop it." That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the bird, about the fish that had disappeared. I knew I had to do something. The next morning, I went to the river with a garbage bag. I picked up bottles, plastic, and cans. At first, I was alone. But then, a few kids from my neighborhood joined me. Day after day, more people came. We cleaned, we planted trees, and we told others about the damage of pollution. It took months, but slowly the river started to change. The water became clearer. Small fish returned. Birds began to sing again. One day, I saw a heron standing in the water, looking for fish. I smiled. That was when I understood. Pollution isn't just trash in the water, it's what happens when people stop caring. But if we choose to care, we can fix what is broken. Now, whenever I see a piece of trash near the river, I don't ignore it. I pick it up because I know that every small action matters. The river is breathing again.
The village that ran out of power. I grew up in a small village where everything depended on electricity. We needed it for cooking, for light, for keeping our food fresh. But our electricity came from an old power station that burned coal. One summer, the power station stopped working. Coal was gone. There was no more fuel to burn. For days, our village was in darkness. We had no fans, no lights, no refrigerators. At night, I could hear the children crying because it was too hot to sleep. The elders whispered, "What will we do?" I asked my father, "Why can't we just get more coal?" He sighed. "Coal is not renewable, Sophia. Once it's gone, it's gone." That word renewable stayed in my mind. I didn't understand it fully, but I knew we needed a new way to get power. One day, I went to the nearest town to find answers. I met an engineer who told me, "Coal is limited, but the sun and wind are renewable. They never run out." That gave me hope. I returned to my village and told everyone, "We don't need coal. We can use renewable energy, solar panels, and wind turbines." First, people laughed. "Where will we get the money? Who will build it?" But I didn't give up. I went back to the town, talked to the engineer, and found a way. Some organizations helped us buy solar panels. Some workers came to install a small wind turbine. It wasn't easy, but after months of work, something amazing happened. One night, the lights turned on again, not because of coal, but because of the sun and wind. Our village was no longer in darkness. The next morning, I looked up at the wind turbine turning slowly in the breeze. I smiled. Now, we never worry about running out of coal. Our energy comes from renewable sources, clean, endless, and safe. I finally understood. Renewable means something that never runs out. And just like the sun and the wind, hope is renewable too.
The farm that could not survive. I grew up on my grandfather's farm. It was beautiful green fields, fresh vegetables, and animals running freely. But there was a problem. Grandfather used too much water for the crop. The soil became weaker every year. The cows and chickens ate more than the land could provide. Every season, things got harder. One day, a terrible drought hit. The river dried up and the crops died. The cows had no grass to eat. Our farm was failing. "We need to change," I told Grandfather. "This way of farming is not sustainable." He frowned. "What do you mean?" I had learned about sustainable farming in school. I explained, "A sustainable farm is one that lasts for many years. It doesn't use too much water. It doesn't harm the soil. It takes care of the land so the land can take care of us." Grandfather shook his head. "I've farmed this way for 50 years. But it's not sustainable anymore," I insisted. That night, I researched ways to make the farm sustainable. The next morning, I showed Grandfather my ideas. "We can collect rainwater instead of taking from the river," I said. We can grow different crops that don't need too much water. We can feed the animals in a way that helps the land. At first, he didn't listen. But when another season passed, and we had almost nothing left, he finally agreed. We started small. We built a system to save rainwater. We changed our crops. We let the soil rest. It took time, but something amazing happened. The farm started to heal. The river came back. The soil became strong again. Our animals were healthier. Grandfather smiled. Now, this is a sustainable farm. I nodded. Yes, and if we take care of it, it will last for many generations. I finally understood. Sustainable means something that can last. It means taking care of the earth so the earth can take care of us.
The forests that disappeared before my eyes. I grew up in a small village surrounded by a great forest. Trees were tall, strong, and full of life. Birds sang every morning, and the air smelled fresh. Forest was everything to us. Gave us food, shade, and clean air. But one day I heard loud machines. The sound of trees falling echoed through the village. I ran to see what was happening. Men with chainsaws were cutting down the trees. Why are they doing this? I asked my father. It's deforestation, Emma, he said with a heavy sigh. They cut trees for wood and to make space for buildings. I watched in horror as the green forest turned into empty land. Animals ran away, looking for new homes. The birds stopped singing. The air became dusty. Every day, more trees disappeared. Deforestation was changing our home. The river became smaller because there were no trees to hold the soil. The sun burned hotter without shade. The wind was stronger, carrying dust instead of fresh air. I saw a little monkey sitting on a fallen tree, looking lost. Where will they go now? I whispered. Weeks passed, and the land became dry and lifeless. Deforestation had stolen our forest, our air, and our animals. I felt helpless. But then I had an idea. If we lose trees because of deforestation, maybe we can bring them back. I gathered my friends. We found small tree seedlings and planted them in the empty land. It was hard work, but we didn't stop. We watered them, protected them, and waited. Months later, small trees started to grow. The birds returned. The air felt cleaner. The river started flowing again. One day my father smiled and said, "This is how we fight deforestation. One tree at a time." I nodded. I had learned something important. Deforestation destroys, but if we care for nature, we can rebuild. Now, every time I see a tree, I remember, one tree can make a difference.
When the weather changed forever, I remember the first time I noticed how much the climate was changing. I grew up in a small town where the weather was always the same: warm summers and cold winters. But one year, something was different. The summer was hotter than I had ever felt before. The air was heavy, and even the trees seemed to be struggling to survive. I asked my grandfather about it. He had lived in this town for many years, and he knew everything about the land. "Grandpa," I said, "why is the weather so hot this year?" He looked at the sky for a moment and then said, It's the climate, Jack. The world's climate is changing. It's not just here, it's everywhere. At first, I didn't understand. The climate? I had heard the word before, but I didn't know what it really meant. Grandpa explained to me that climate is the usual weather patterns in a place over a long time. It's different from weather, which can change every day. The climate is like the general mood of the weather in a place, and it had been changing slowly for many years. The next winter, there was almost no snow. It was so warm that people were wearing jackets instead of heavy coat. The cold winds that used to come in December didn't arrive. It felt strange, and I started to feel worried. The plants, animals, and people in our town were used to the old climate. What would happen if the climate kept changing like this? One day, I went to the river where I used to fish with my friends. But the water level was low. It was as if the river was thirsty. I heard stories about how the climate was affecting places far away too, causing droughts and floods in other countries. It made me sad to think about how people all over the world were experiencing changes in their climate. I decided to learn more. I studied how the Earth's climate was affected by things like pollution, cutting down trees, and using too much energy. I learned that we could help fix it by saving energy, planting trees, and using clean energy from the sun and wind. Now, every time I feel the weather change, I think about how important the climate is. It's not just about hot or cold, it's about the world we live in. We must take care of our climate so that it can take care of us. The river that took everything. When I was a child, I loved playing near the river that ran through our village. The river was beautiful, with clear water and tall trees on its bank. I would spend hours there, watching the water flow gently and imagining all the adventures it could bring. But over the years, something started to change. One summer, I noticed the land near the river was different. The soil looked like it had been eaten away, leaving behind large holes. It was as if the land was slowly disappearing. I asked my father about it, and he explained something I had never heard of before: erosion. Erosion, my father said, is when the wind, water, or ice wears away the land over time. The river's water carries away bits of soil and rocks, and it makes the land weaker. That's why you see all those holes. At first, I didn't understand how water could do such a thing. But my father took me to the river bank one afternoon, and we watched as the water rushed by. I could see the small pieces of earth being carried away with every wave. The more I looked, the more I understood how powerful erosion could be. It wasn't something that happened in a day. It took years, but slowly the river was changing the land forever. The following year, I saw the damage for myself. The trees we used to play under were falling, their roots exposed because the land had eroded away beneath them. The river's path was changing, and some parts of our village were becoming less safe to live in. The damage was becoming more visible every day. It wasn't just the trees and the land, the homes along the river were also at risk. One day I asked my father, "Can we stop erosion?" He nodded but said, "It's hard, Ben. We can try to plant trees and build barriers to slow it down, but erosion is something that happens naturally. We just have to be careful and keep working to protect the land." Now, as an adult, I see how erosion has affected more than just my village. It has taken away parts of the land, leaving scars in the earth that will take years to heal. But I also see how we can help by planting trees and protecting the soil. We can slow down erosion and give the land a chance to heal.